Good morning, traders. It's Wednesday, May the 10th. Taking a look at the charts, we got the SPY daily chart here, and you can see we talked about this a long time ago, actually. Pretty much, I think we pretty much called this kind of a little bit of a pivot high right there, and we talked about how we were going into some type of uh, fairly long consolidation, intermediate consolidation, very similar. And we referred to something back very similar to this, where we're going to see probably a month or two or three sideways here until the market can really stabilize and start the next run up. And that's pretty much where we've gone. We've pretty much had almost the same amount of time going sideways here as we saw back here, and the market's holding up with this kind of little pattern here, and it's popped up and trading up near the highs with these little bars, very similar to what we've seen back over here, and then these little bars kind of floating up here. So I do feel as though the markets are very close to wanting to pop and continue the next leg higher. That being said, you can see there could be a little bit of a washout, a little bit of a test back down to the 20-day moving average, which would bring us back down over here. And this is kind of what I've been looking for this week. I think this week, potentially very early next week, Monday or Tuesday, we could see the market kind of flush down, have a little shakeout, come down to the 20-day moving average potentially, and then start to march higher and take the next run up. And we could see potentially 2,500 or 250 on the SPY reached going forward. Now, if we take a look at, let's just take a look over here at energies. Let's jump over to crude oil real quick here. Crude oil is trading down near these significant lows where we've got intermediate cycle lows happening. Over here, we had a little bit of a consolidation kind of form. It came down to a significant support zone, and we were talking about a breakout of to the upside or to the downside. An upside would bring us to 53.54, and a downside would bring us down to 43.44. And we ended up breaking to the upside. It ran for a couple weeks right up to that level, and then it rolled over, and we broke this support zone, and it came right down and hit our target. We were talking about here that if it did break and close below it, it was probably going to flush all the way down to the 43.44, which it did. And now we're in this kind of consolidation zone. Very similar to a type of price action back over here and a significant type of pivot low over here. So overall, if we take a look at those kind of moves and you look at these bottom cycles where we have the intermediate market clustering here, the pink line down in the lower kind of reversal zone, we had the same type of thing over here. We had the same type of thing right over here. And more or less, the market got down into this oversold reversal zone with a little cluster down there on this washout low. That being said, we could see price continue to kind of fade back down potentially and flounder here for a little bit, and we could see these come back down a little bit more and come back down and test. Very similar to over here, the initial drop brought everything down to a little cluster, and then the market kind of underperformed and floundered, and we got more of a cluster with the little bit more of a move down here. But you can see how we're down at this significant pivot zone and support level. Obviously support going back into this zone here, which is this previous pivot low. Right through the heart of this consolidation, this oscillation here. And if you look at these blue bars in the background, volume by price, it goes to show that it's a high volume support area. So price settled down into there and investors bought more, added to their position, and it's creating that bounce. So I feel as though crude oil is very close to potentially finding a significant low here again. And whichever way it breaks, if it breaks to the upside, then we're probably going to go right back up to the pretty quickly to the $50. If not, continue to move back up to this 53, 54. If it does break down and close below it, we're going down to this next level down here, which will be somewhere around the 40 level, which is also the measured move. If you take this move and put a bear flag in here and then continue it down, brings us down to that as well for a measured move. So this pattern here is starting to set up. We are at an extreme pivot low, and the question is, which way is it going to break out of this pattern? Is it going to continue to move up or continue to move down from that consolidation pattern? Now, taking a look at precious metals, gold up 0.5%, silver up almost 1%. In the grand scheme of things, when you look at the chart here, nothing too significant. Obviously, it sold down, closed near the low of the day. Today, it's gapping up. And we talked about this earlier on Monday, that I think this week we're going to see volatility in the precious metals sector, and that it's going to try to find a bottom, potentially get some type of short-term oversold bounce. But because we are in a downtrend, its potential, the best case scenario is really just some sideways chop. We don't really actually get a bounce. We get a sideways chop and then it continues to drop. Very similar to when the trend is down, very similar to something like this, where instead of it coming down to getting short-term oversold, moving to a moving average and having a bounce back up, all it does is trade sideways and then just loses ground again. So there is that potential. We're getting these bars here. You can see these fairly long bars. This is kind of this, you could argue that this is potentially just a running correction in the market, and you've got this drop, and then you got the running correction, and you get the second half of that drop, which would bring us down to 1200. So again, more or less bearish on precious metals at this point, and I think next week we can continue to see lower prices in precious metals going forward, because I feel as though the equities market is going to finally get some stability and start that next leg higher. Taking a quick look at natural gas. Natural gas has a nice pop, consolidating above the 20-day moving average. Obviously, we're going to have inventory numbers out today. Oh, sorry, that's tomorrow, Thursday. But overall, we're having some pretty good volume moving in here. It looks as though it's built a nice big bull flag. It's testing up here. If this does pop and break, we could see a fairly significant move, and it could bring us. The first measured move will be right up here around the 350 mark, which is a measured move just from eyeballing it. But if we actually mark it up here, we can see where that measured move would be. So let's just see. 344 would be the measured move to the upside just from this current small bullish price action, which brings us right into these two previous pivot highs over here, which makes sense. And there's a little blip over here of volume by price comes over here. Lots of volume at that level to run into. So that's a short-term target, the 344. Right now we're at 327 in pre-market trading. We're seeing natural gas trade up 1.4% this morning. Now, one last thing to touch on real quick, the VIX. I've thrown on some simple time cycles over the last going back about a year or so, maybe not quite a year, but taking a look at, you can see these cycles. Long story short is the VIX, the fear tends to kind of, we get fearful and then not fearful, fearful, not fearful, and it's fairly consistent across the board time-wise, and more or less we're seeing multi-year low volatility, and we're on the upswing here. So meaning yesterday we did see the VIX move up a little bit, but potentially any day now we could see the VIX start to, it's not going to spike big by any means. It could just be one of these little blips here where we get a 2 or 3 day pop. But we're ready here for the VIX to have a 2 or 3 day pop, which would give us that little pullback to the 20-day moving average on the SPY or the SP 500 index. And then we could see the VIX fade back down again and go through its cycle. And as it fades down, obviously the SP 500 would be breaking out and running to new highs. So I am expecting a little bit of fear in the market, the VIX to start to pop here, and that'll kind of give us a potential another entry point to add to our long position in the SPY, and potentially give us a short position in the precious metals market, as they'll go in opposite directions, I feel, going forward. Now, also taking a look at the US dollar index. This is the daily chart, and it's zoomed back to September of last year. But we've had a massive rally, and now we're having a huge bull flag forming here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're on the fifth wave down, and more or less it's trading within this range. But this is overall a very bullish price action. And if the US dollar does rocket and start to rally higher, obviously it's going to put a ton of pressure on commodities, specifically precious metals. So a breakout of this pattern, I think, is going to really help or hinder the price of gold and silver going forward. If it breaks to the upside, we could be in for some serious trouble for maybe a washout low, a significant sell-off in precious metals. If it does break down and start to give way and give back more or less this recent rally here, then I think we could see gold continue to move up and firm up. But at this point, it's right in the middle of the range, so it's got a bunch of work to do before it breaks out and closes outside of that pattern. And this is a fairly large pattern. If we go to the weekly chart, you can see it a little bit better here. So we're potentially, from the looks of it, we're at least another bar, a weekly close away from it, if not, multiple weeks away from breaking out of this pattern. You need to close above it or close below it to really signify a breakout has taken place on the weekly chart, and that'll usually trigger a continuation move either to the upside or to the downside. Anyways, that's it for this morning. Talk to you in a little bit. Bye bye.